Yo, how's it going?
I'm good, mate. Thanks for asking.
Cool. What's happening?
I am in my studio in Manor House and currently have Ableton open, but I'm staring at it with not a lot going on, which seems to be the story of my lockdown.
I think it's the story of everyone's lockdown, mate. Like, it's been really difficult, isn't it, to feel like there's a purpose or like any reason to write music. But I guess actually that's like, it's kind of leading me definitely down the path of thinking to write stuff that's not very clubby at all.
Yeah, I've got a folder of demos, and I think one of them is like dance floor-esque.
Right.
And the rest are just like, nice little summery bubblers. Or just little vibes, or just weird little beats that I just vibe to in my studio. But then if I think about what other people think about it, they probably think I was smoking way too much weed.
No one gives a like. I think that's the challenge is to get to the point where you don't care what other people think about those ones.
Yeah, you know what? I had this little kind of thought today where I was like, I know people always say it, and you always hear about it. People just say, I make music for myself.
Yeah.
And like today, I was just vibing on this little tune, and I was like, I really like this, and I kind of don't care if A, it doesn't come out, or B, if it does come out, people are like, I'm just like, I'm vibing. So.
Yeah, I think I can tell you definitely from personal experience that those are the ones you're most proud of when you just believe in yourself and put something out there and you still love it like later, even if it's not the one that people like really dig. Yeah. It's like, if you really like it and it's like the one that you thought that's wicked and that is like perfect what I was trying to do, or like I caught a little vibe with that one, they're definitely the ones that I always look back on and think, yeah, I'm glad I was confident enough in that one to
I'm definitely like slightly conscious of the fact that if things do ever get back to normal, like, am I going to be able to get into that headspace of, okay, now I need to write stuff that other people like?
Of course you will. Of course you will.
Yeah, but it's like I've had like 9 months now of just chilling, writing little chord progressions, and now I'm going to be like, now I've got to open up Serum and like twist up the bass a bit.
The irony is that the ones that people like best are the ones where you've indulged. It just is. Yeah. That's just how it is. Like, where you've gone on a weird tangent and somehow brought it back. Not, like if you do the ones that you think people will like, they tend not to. It's always the way.
Yeah.
So I spoke to Charlie Brake yesterday, and I was speaking to Tim Reaper shortly, or maybe on Monday, just sort of chatting about like the process really, because I think it's always quite nice to give a little bit of extra context about how these things come together, and obviously
cross-promotion material.
Yeah, it's sort of that, but it's also like I see it as like I'm confident enough to do this sort of thing, having done a few episodes of the podcast, so I don't really mind calling people up and like just having a chat and knowing that there's an inherent value in that in itself. So my memory of this one is that I asked you if you were up for doing a remix, and you were like, I'm not sure if I got time, and I was like, oh, okay, well, just let me know if you do. And then I asked you again, and you were like, yeah, maybe got time. I was like, well, you can do any tune you want. And then you picked the one that you ended up doing, and I was like, no, I don't think you should do that one. I think you should do one of the other ones. I can't remember which tune it was I suggested, but another one.
Well, the way I remember it, Jack, was that you hit me up, asked me if I wanted to do a remix. I said, yeah, of course. And you said, cool, take your pick. I then took my pick. And you said, no, not that one.
Nah.
And then I was like, okay. And then you hit me up again, and you were like, right, have you chosen one? I was like, yeah, I've already chosen one. And you were like, no, don't choose that one. And I was like, but I thought you said I could have my pick. And I put my foot down. And eventually you chose.
That is true. And obviously it panned out okay in the end. So, but I do want, first of all, to pick your brain as to why you picked that tune.
I picked that tune because I remember we did a gig in Belgium with Alex, and you played it, and I hadn't heard it before, and I remember just like swan necking over your shoulder and being like, what the beep is this? And it was one of your new bits, and I just remember that vocal. It was just like that vocal was so chilling over the kind of real, like, sparse, kind of arid, and I mean that in like in a descriptive way, not a kind of insult, like the kind of arid landscape of the beat, you know. And I just remember I really like those kind of, that style of beats when the drums and the bass is very kind of is very like just hypnotic, you know, and then you've got something really kind of eerie over the top, and that I was just like, it kind of just stood out to me. So then when you asked me, I was like, I loved the emotion of the vocal, and I just thought that I could maybe add some deeper context to that vocal.
I think what's interesting about and I thought this from the get-go, what I thought was interesting about what you've done with it is it's somehow like more upfront in its aggression, but also more musical in the sort of, with the extra musicality that you've added to it. So it's like I wanted to play on the kind of harmonies, you know, like, because like the potential of that vocal, from what I heard, was that there was so much cool shit you could do with the music, which I'm kind of glad you didn't do in your one, because it kind of served its purpose fully, you know. It kind of just, it created that dynamic. Well, that tune was very much like what you said, which was earlier, which was like, I rolled that out. It's literally just, there's no layers or anything. It's literally just, it's like a techno drum loop sample and bass and vocal and maybe like an arpeggiator or a slight pad in there. And I literally did, I think I like did it in one day or 2 days, played it a couple of times and was like, yeah, that kind of works. I'm not gonna, some certain tunes I just go, I'm not gonna touch that anymore. That's just done. And I just, because for me, it's like you capture the vibe in that session, and then sometimes you ruin it by going back and going back and going back and making adjustments. Obviously, sometimes those sessions are needed, but with what I intended to do with the original, it was doing it. So I didn't want to just add more sounds for the sake of it. So I guess actually I didn't, when you said you wanted to do it, I didn't have the vision that you had, because obviously I probably wasn't as objective as you were in terms of listening to it, hearing it and being like, oh, I can hear what I'm going to do with this now. So
I don't think that, I mean, just as a philosophical point, I don't think that's possible. And I think that's the beauty of remixes, is that people will hear things that you never would have. That's the beauty of collaboration and remixes, in my opinion, is that, you know, someone is just going to come with some sideways thought you're just going to be like, oh wow, I never actually thought of that, and that's really cool. And I guess like another reason that I took that was is that I kind of thought, actually, I don't know what I'm talking about here. Cut. I was gonna talk about why I did jungle thing, but that's not why I chose it. I ended up discovering that I wanted to take it on a jungle tip after I started writing it.
That makes sense.
I didn't listen to the tune and be like, oh, I can hear a jungle remix. I heard the tune and I was like, I can hear a kind of like a chordal melody, like melodic thing. But initially I was just like, it's just going to have just standard drums. And then,
but it's that juxtaposition of those two things that make it good. But also, like, just to really latch onto that point, I think it's really interesting when, and it's always been the case for me, that if I go in and specifically want to write a certain type of tune, I never can. Whereas if I go in and just allow the process to dictate what comes out, then whatever comes out, and it's usually better that way. So it's interesting that you said, like, you just started and then suddenly it was like, oh, this is a jungle tune. Because if you'd have gone in and go, right, I want to make this like a dance floor banger, which weirdly what you did is, but if you went in and said you wanted to do it in a more traditional format, or more traditional sort of DJ format way, it might not have come out. It would have come out different, or it might not have even happened. Because I just think when you sort of predetermine what you want to be working on, it never works. For me, anyway. I'm just like, I'm always more interested in the process.
I guess I have like, sometimes I come with like a direction. Like I might turn on the computer and say to myself, right, I'm going to write something that's a bit more aggressive, or a bit more, I'm feeling a bit, I've got like a build up of energy that I want to get out, and the energy is like a bit dark, so let me write something dark.
Yeah,
or
definitely.
I might be like, actually, do you know what? The thing that dictates whether I write liquid or whether I write like aggy dance floor stuff is, if I find a good sample, then I'll just write liquid tune. Standard.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'm kind of struggling for samples, then I'll just open up Serum and start messing around, and then come up with a little riff and be like, oh, that's cool, and just roll it out.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think I find it so easy to write liquid these days. Yeah. I think the only bit that's difficult for me really is making interesting drums for them, because I get that's like the one thing I've sort of, that I think I've like cornered off as the Workforce project has progressed, is like, I always spend like loads and loads of time on my drums, like loads and loads of time.
You can tell.
Making sure they're like different every time, and not just rehashing the same sort of sounding drums, but also the same layers. So like, I just get bored if I've done tunes where I've used the same drums before, but it's usually liquid tunes, because it's so hard to get that vibe right, where you've got the shuffle and the punch and sort of the groove. Because those tunes are generally quite a straight groove, especially with the kicks. They're quite straight, aren't they? And then getting the shuffles right is tough. So
it's funny. I saw Dylan from the Upbeats the other day. He lives like right around the corner from me. We meet up kind of fairly regularly. Yeah. And we were just chatting, and I was playing him some new stuff. And he said, and I guarantee he meant it in a nice way, but it was just funny how it landed with me. He was like, there's definitely a formula to liquid these days where all you have to do is put a think break on it and it just sounds legit. And I was like, and I just listened back to like the last 4 or 5 demos I played, and they all just had some version of a think break on it, and I was like, damn it.
Yeah, I think like mine is just hot pants. I just have a hot pants and everything liquid, and that is I'm not sure if that's a think break or just like a version of the think break. I think it is.
No, I think hot pants is different.
Okay. The shuffles are really
tiny drums.
Oh yeah, I know what you mean. Sorry, the think break's what you used in this remix, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
The kind of James Brown. Well, no, it's not. It's Lynn Collins, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's got the vocal things in it.
Yeah.
Which everyone uses. But what I was going to say is I've noticed over the last, I guess, year that I've gone the complete opposite route to you, which is that I spend no time on drums.
Really?
Yeah, I've got like a folder on my computer. Every time I write a tune, I'll bounce the drum break, and then I'll bounce the like the full break, and then I'll bounce just the kick and the snare. Mm-hmm. And so I've just got like a bank of just like things that I can just drag into a project just to get a vibe, because the thing I'm more interested in is capturing the vibe like melodically and musically.
Okay. I just can't move on until I've got the drums right, and that's why
and this is the thing, and like when it comes to it, I think what I do is actually holding me back, because it means that I can progress with the music more, because I can get the chords down and I can get a vibe, but then I end up getting so used to the actual sonics of the tune that then when I go, oh, well, this is just the break from another tune, and I take it out, then I'm like, all I want to do is either put it back in or try and make the drum sound as close to what I've just taken out. And so then it ends up feeling really similar.
Yeah, I find it really difficult if I've made a tune with drums that are like just in there as a placeholder to then go back and write different ones.
Yeah.
And the other thing with where I've made this sort of differentiation in my own head is that if I start with the beat and then get them sounding really, really good, with stuff that's not musical or like sample led, I just let the key of the beats dictate the key of what I'm making, so that if I know the kick's in a certain route, I'll just work around that so that I know that everything's going to fit and like sound super tidy. Whereas with musical stuff, it's more difficult because you have to start with everything in that key, and if you've got a sample there and using my process of having to have the drums ready first, I'm like, right, well, I've got to write a tune with the kick in this route and the snare in this for it to sound better melodically with this sample that I'm going to put in later. So
yeah, see, I don't pay attention to any of that stuff, and I think that's a pro and a con, because it's a con because it's from a technical point of view, from like an engineering perspective, maybe it doesn't sound as good as it could do had I have made efforts to make sure that stuff was right. But then I find if I just start with drums and then get like a really lashing loop on the go, then it kind of limits where I can go with it. Because if I just spend time, and these placeholders, I've got a varying degree of them. Some of them have like really intense shuffles going on. Some of them are just very minimal. Some of them are really like swung and loose and stuff. And I'll kind of get a basic progression going and then just audition different loops. And I'll go, okay, this is the kind of shuffle and the groove that I want. And then I'll find all these little pockets for like little hits and little kind of turnarounds, little melodic kind of things to create this kind of soundscape. And I don't think I'd be able to do that if I'd spent time just making the drum loop with nothing else going on, because I think it would limit me to what I could then do with the music. If that makes sense.
It's funny how that process is so different, because I'm opposite. Like I find if I come back after 2 or 3 days of like having a break from something and I've written something that I thought was really good and the sample's really good, but the drums are cack, I just have to shelve it.
100%. And this is what I end up doing.
But I do find myself like I've salvaged loads of tunes before where I've had a wicked sample but not caught the vibe with the drums, and then gone back, found it a year later and just be like, that sample is still wicked, and like just bounced it out of the project, and then just found a whole new beat and wrote a whole new beat, and it's come together. So it's not like working in vain, it's still there for later. That's it is disheartening when that happens, I find, but it's all bankable, and actually when you think about it, like you can just come back to it later and once you've disentangled yourself from it a bit. And I've even had to kind of, I don't know what the word is, I've had to convince myself that it's all right to do that. I have this real thing where, like, once I've signed off on a project, whether it's finished or not, once I've been like, right, I'm not going to work on this anymore, it's almost hallowed ground to me. Like I don't want to go back and touch it. And so I've had to, like, the last 6 months, I've just been, struggling for inspiration, a bit bored, and so I've been like, actually, do you know what? It's fine. I've spent the time gathering all of these amazing samples and these palettes. Of course, I can go back to them. But I've had this weird thing for back in the days where I was just like, if I wrote something and it didn't turn out, then I'd just be like, just move on, That mentality is a gift and a curse, though, because it means you beat yourself up over projects, but it means that you're aiming for a really high standard to be able to sign off. So it's one of those things that I've reconciled with in more recent years, that actually the fact that I overthink everything to the nth degree, and the fact that I overwork everything to the nth degree, and I'm just constantly trying to make things better, is obviously a good thing. But it's bad for your health because you stress yourself out with it. But
the thing that, like, the thing about that stops me, as in the thing about overthinking and having high standards that stops me is that I'm worried that if I start something, it's not going to be to the standard that I want, so I just don't even start. Yeah,
I know what you mean. Or I find, actually, if I've just finished one that I'm really happy with, I find it very difficult to move on to something else because I feel like you've
you're like, I'm just not going to write anything that good again.
The way I think of it, this is the way I've talked about it before when I've spoken to other people about it, is that you make something that you're convinced is good, and after a few revisits, you're pretty certain that it's really good, and then you basically sit back and admire it for ages. Listen to it, make sure that you're convinced that it is as good as you think it is, and then maybe tweak and fuck about with it, and often do damage to it, not actually improve it very much.
I recently went back and I was just listening to old bounces. Every time I bounce something, I've just got it in one folder, and it's split up by year. So it's like 2018, I've got all the bounces I did in 2018, whether it's just like a little 16-bar loop of a vibe, or a whole tune, or like 10 versions of the same tune when I'm coming to like finishing it. It's all just in one folder, and I kind of periodically go through and check to see if I've missed anything. And I found the first bounce of Independent, and it sounds remarkably similar to actually the finished tune.
It's so much about what mindset you're in when you're working on it, because if you can come back later when you're not attached, you can review and see things in a totally different way, can't you? It's mad.
Because I was actually quite impressed with myself that the V1, it was called like October Roller V1. And I played it against the finished tune. Obviously, like the finished tune is a bit more polished and a bit brighter, but like the idea's there. And I think that's something that you kind of forget, is that you write an idea, the idea comes very quickly, and then the finished tune is just a kind of extended version of a very quick idea, which takes sometimes months to kind of get to that finished state.
So I guess actually, part of me's thinking, let's not go too deep and let's save this for an actual podcast episode. But this is all really cool, and I'm going to obviously leave it all in. But let's talk about then how that process has to differ for a remix, where you're on a timeline. You can't just arbitrarily kick the can down the road and like think about, I don't know, like, oh, I'll finish that later. There's no real, deadline for it. How does it work? How do you like reconcile and deal with remixes and that pressure that sometimes comes with it, and like just being given the parts and like that process? How do you find that easy? Or
so typically when I get remixes through, I download the parts and then I don't touch them for like 3 or 4 days. Like, so when you sent me the bits, I think I had to hit you up again. I was like, can you send me the link again, because it expired or something. Because I need to like psych myself up, because I'm like, right, now I'm going to undertake this process of actually doing something, and I have to put my mind to it and think. Whereas if you're writing an original, you can just kind of like just wing it until something kind of comes. So yeah, I just kind of put everything on when I'm feeling up to it, I just put everything on the page, and then just start messing around. And I think initially with your one, I just went through my standard process. I just put drums on it to see what kind of vibe it got with a kind of standard drum beat. And then I think whilst I was auditioning, I had the think break on it, and then I just heard that kind of stuttered loop, that stuttered break with the snare repeating, and I just did that, and I was like, oh yeah, cool, this is a vibe.
Did you make this during lockdown?
Yeah,
so it's interesting that, isn't it? Because it's got you might not have been so confident doing that groove if we weren't in lockdown, if you wanted people to play it. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I do. I don't know if I agree with that though. I think I'm of the mindset that if I can convince myself that it's good, then I'll be up for doing anything. And as long as I can eventually convince myself that it sounds good and that I'm happy to put my name to it, I guess there's a truth in that. I was probably more willing to experiment with something off the map in relation to what my name is synonymous with, because it was lockdown. So I was like, well, I guess that's just a roundabout way of agreeing with you.
Yeah, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Like, I think like I've certainly been less conscious about, and I think actually it's really shone a light on like how that straight drum and bass groove has just become so widespread and accepted as the DJ groove in a lot of people's sets. It's like often that people do little sections of different grooves and then they'll come back to just a straight roller for a section of 20-30 minutes. And I think it's really exemplified actually how sort of rife it was and how people, in order to have their music played, would often default to that groove. I've certainly felt that way. Like,
yeah, I know what you mean. And I tell you what was a big inspiration for me, like when I eventually cut up the break to a sound like that, what gave me the reassurance that actually I could do something like that was listening to Breakage's stuff.
Yeah.
Because he does that in such a good way. Like every EP that he's put out in the last, since he's been making music, but recently whilst I've been DJing, in the last couple of years since he started his own label, I've played everything that he's done, and
same.
It always sounds really good.
Yeah, same.
And it's like a real treat for me because whilst I'm DJing, I get quite bored of the same groove and just the kind of, the two-step, and then you add a breakage tune, and it's just got some lashing like drums, really tight, bass is always really on point, and just really, grooves kind of all over the place.
Well, what's mad is that they're DJ tools, but not in the DJ tool drum format. They're like very simply effective tunes, but with that different step that he just executes really, really well. Yeah, he's been a massive sort of catalyst for people experimenting more so with different grooves within drum and bass. I mean, there's obviously certain people that do it quite a bit, like Charlie Break does it quite a lot, but he still loves a straight sort of rollout as well.
Yeah.
And actually, that was what we talked about when I was talking to him yesterday about the remix that he did. Was that the tune I gave him had a really weird groove on it, and he just switched it back the other way. And it's kind of the opposite with you, where mine was quite straight, and you've switched it and taken the DNA in a different way to bring it back together. I actually prefer your version than mine now. I haven't even listened to mine for a while. I just think I know that what I was thinking. I know the headspace I was in when I was writing those tunes, and it is hard to explain, but it's very similar to like the headspace of all the music on that collection that I did. It's quite like head down, shoegazy, simple. Yeah. And it is written for a club. And also for that moment in a set where something different happens. It's why there's the breakdown and stuff. It's like, I guess the way I think about writing tunes like that is thinking about little moments in sets, and that's why I feel a bit rudderless at the minute. It's like you're creating a tune to create a moment in yours and anyone else who wants to play its DJ set, whereas now it's like different.
It's like when I was playing loads of hip hop, like we'd always make edits of tunes so that we could fit it into a set. And then as a DJ producer, you have an idea of the kind of the tone and the energy of your set, and then you want to just be able to fill gaps in that space with your own productions. And for me, because Breakage had been so consistently putting out that stuff, I was getting to a point in my set where I was just playing like 4 or 5 Breakage tunes in a row. And I was like, I need to, and that's fine. I don't mind doing that. But I guess it was out of my own curiosity. And I was like, can I do something that's like this that will sound as good that I can put in that section,
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm kind of upset that I never really got to test that out.
Did you not you played it the other night when we were in Bristol, didn't you?
Yeah, but it's there's a difference between a lockdown system and a proper system.
Yeah, no, you're right. No, I tell you what I did, right? Before I played my first sit-down set a few weeks ago, I hired out one of those pirate studios. So this was between lockdown 1 and lockdown 2. I hired one of those pirate studios. The only session I could get was 8 a.m. till 10 a.m. So I literally got up super early, got over there, and was just like, they've got lashing systems in those rooms. So I just turned up really loud and was just like, it was like there was a lot of energy pent up having not done a gig. I didn't realise, and I hadn't really quantified how important all that stuff is. So
dude, massively, man.
Mate.
Like, I mean, for us, I mean, we're just nerdy introverts, but like we all need an outlet of energy and self-expression, and like that's something that kind of dawned on me quite quickly, is that going out and performing, as much as we like to think that we're really cool and we like stand behind the decks in our black t-shirts and think that we're like God's gift, like there's an absolute truth to the fact that it's like a release of energy that we need as people. Everybody has their own version of it, whether you're going out playing sports or whatever. For us it's like going out and raising the gun fingers for 60 minutes.
And that's it, spot on. It's like a release of energy, and I think when that builds up, that's when I become a very difficult character. I'm a difficult character anyway, but
are you?
I'm more aware of it. Fuck off. I'm certainly more aware of it. But basically without gigs or without studio, I'm just become shit. If things are going good for me in the studio, I'm so buoyant and happy and positive, and if they're not going well, you'll know when
that meme you sent me.
Which one?
It was like, what was it? It was like the Simpsons one, and it was like Bart Simpson was smashing pans, and it was like good day in the studio, and then it was like next to it he was like curled up in bed, and it was like bad day in the studio.
Yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
All right, well look, we'll definitely have you on for, like, I think it would be really good to have you on and for me to really think out an actual longer form, like hour and a half, 2 hour chat for the podcast. I think we should definitely do that, because obviously we were only literally scratching the surface, so it'd be really good to do that in the next few months. And I've got a plan to resurrect the podcast series. I've just had a bit of a rest over summer and didn't want to start repeating myself over and over again. Also, like, just really desperate to diversify the people that I have on. Gender, diversify like the ethnicity of some of the guests. And also get out of drum and bass a little bit as well and get some. Because I think what's happened with it is it's obviously building a nice audience, but they're predominantly drum and bass people, and I feel like I'm trying to get drum and bass people. What I want to do is try and get drum and bass people to pay attention to the creative processes of people from outside of drum and bass, to try and rejuvenate drum and bass, so that people like take their cues from outside and then bring them in, rather than taking their cues from within the same circle and just repeating the same shit.
It was actually that kind of, it was something that when you asked me to do this, it was something that I wanted to talk about specifically with regards to the remix, was that as much as it is obviously a drum and bass tune with influences from jungle, like I also wanted to bring in like the 808 stuff. It's so heavily 808, which is obviously a jungle thing, but with some of the, some of these like drill tunes, some of these like these trap tunes now, they're so 808 heavy. And the only difference between, and this was the same when the whole halftime thing was popping off, like the only difference between, old Dilla beats and the stuff that we were doing was that it was just engineered better and it had kind of more gnarly bass sounds to it. And I think the difference with like some of that old school jungle and some of this, trap stuff and like the drill beats is just it's basically just the drums. Like the 808s is some of these old Dillinger tunes. If you took out the drums and just put like a halftime trap beat on it would be so cold. And so I wanted to kind of capture that drill and that kind of trap vibe with the 808s, just very, very heavy, like Kenny beats and all those American guys who just rinse those 808s. I actually think the 808 I used was a Kenny Beats one. And then add some pitch bend to it and you've just got a drill tune. with a jungle beat over the top.
Yeah.
And so that was like, I really wanted to capture that, especially in the second half of the remix where the 808s just go a bit mad.
Well, that's what I was going to say actually. There's like, that was the last thing I was going to try and touch on just with regard to that tune, is that it's got a very typical complicated Halogenix arrangement, which is great. It just makes it really detailed and constantly evolving. Yeah, like I notice it in all of your tunes, like that you tend to work, like you can hear that you've put a lot of time and energy into the arrangement and the progression of a tune from start to end.
Yeah.
It will go through lots of different iterations, and you and I have had this conversation before where I've just been like, I'll just roll, like you can just roll that out, that's ready to go. But you
and
almost,
I'm just like, no.
Yeah, but that's a good thing. That's obviously that's like a good trait to have as a producer, because it means that you're trying to push, and that's like you're not just happy to just roll it out. But obviously, you know, there's that whole middle section where those massive chords come in and it like almost the key almost changes and then it comes back. So yeah.
Yeah, I when I'm writing, and this is something that I was thinking about today, I try and find a comparison. Like I try and think of what does this sound like that I like listening to, and so just to kind of give me either some inspiration or some reassurance that I'm on the right track. And there were so many different people came to my mind when I was writing that tune. It was like Breakage came into my head, D-Bridge came into my head, Kenny Beats, like trap and drill music came into my head. You had like Flume coming into my head with the big chords. And I really like doing that because it kind of makes me feel that I'm not, like we were saying earlier, I'm not just looking at drum and bass and being like, what can I do that sounds like drum and bass?
The best drum and bass tunes are those that aren't just like inward looking and rehashing old ideas. Not old ideas.
Yeah.
I think you can take the vibe of older stuff and then just, it's when you do something more interesting with it and bring it back.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, look, I'm really, really pleased we made it happen. I'm actually really pleased with how the whole thing's come together in the end. I didn't really have any aspirations for it, but I just think I've just managed to get, obviously, good people that I've managed to wangle to come and work on this project with me. And yeah, I'm really pleased with it. All right, cool. Well, thanks for coming on, and yeah, thanks for being part of the project. And
thanks, Jack.
You're welcome. I'll speak to you soon.
All right, mate.
Take it easy.
Safe, bro.
In a bit.
Bye.